What a heart-rending and inspirational story, Vijay. Our next speaker is a soldier at heart who not only fought valiantly at the Kargil War, but when debilitated by severe injuries and near-death experiences in combat, just decided to fight back and create a life which most people in his situation would not have even dreamt of. A graduate of Indian Military Academy and IIM Ahmedabad, please welcome Deependra Sengar.
Okay, so after a heavy lunch, we need some light personal stories, stories of some ordinary men like me. But we have to make it interesting. To make it interesting, we will focus on the arrogance in the story. We'll focus on the arrogance of youth, arrogance of ignorance, arrogance of naivete. The story started in a small town in central part of India. For as long as I can remember, I always wanted to join the armed forces, wear the uniform, defeat the bad guys, and live happily ever after. I was packed off to a military preparatory school at a very young age. Physically, I was one of the tiniest in the batch of 60. Even when I got commissioned at the age of 20, I was less than 100 pounds. And naturally, with this kind of a tiny frame, I was medically rejected for being underweight. And I had to cross that hurdle too. The Special Forces guys, they are tough guys. And to be one, you have to pass a probation, which is not easy either. My wanting to join the Special Forces at that time was an act of arrogance. When I finally did, it was a dream come true. It was like day zero placement in the institute parlance. Got busy with the usual training and combat and a lot more. Jumping off the cliffs without anyone pushing you, climbing mountains without any reason, those were certain hobbies. And guarding frontiers like Siachen Glacier was the profession. In February 1998, in a very close firefight, I got multiple gunshot wounds. The bullets had gone through the stomach, damaging the intestine and the bladder. I was evacuated in time by chopper, was treated by one of the best teams of surgeons who snipped away some parts of the anatomy. When my doc met me in the post-op room, he told me, "You had a lot of guts." So we cut away some. I was also told that my days of soldiering will have to be put on hold because I'll have to wear a colostomy and a urinary bag. The arrogant me was not happy. But luckily for me, I had not read the same books as the doctors. So with some help and a lot of paperwork, I was able to get out of the hospital within 3 months. And within 1 year, I was back in action, leading my team in some remote part of the country. Part of elite special forces, Commando Dagger, 10 medals in 9 years of service, Gallantry Award. I was living my dream. Hubris has a way of catching up with all of us in one way or the other. Fast forward to 1999. September of 1999, I'm lying in a hospital bed with a nail passed through the shin with weight attached to it as traction. This was to ensure that the hip joint doesn't move because the bones there had shattered. There were multiple wounds all over the body, which were being tended for recovery. When I was flown into the hospital, the doctors were not even sure that I would survive, but I didn't know that, so I just did. I couldn't move any part of my body, but I was thinking, I've been here, I've seen all this. Weren't the injuries of last time also life-threatening? I'll be out of this place in no time. I remember the first call I made on regaining consciousness was to my commanding officer, requesting him not to appoint any other team commander because I'll be back. That was my arrogance. But then a doctor walks into the hospital room on that fateful day in October and congratulates me for being alive and pronounces his verdict: clinical, direct, and brutal. He said, "You will never walk again." I was shaken. Doctor's verdict shook the arrogance out of me. It meant that I would be on a wheelchair or at best on crutches for the rest of my life. My world had turned upside down. I didn't sleep that night with one strange feeling for the first time in my life. I have lost everything. But by morning, I had another echo in my mind. Not everything, not yet. I had taken a decision. I had decided that I would quit the armed forces and join the corporate world. Arrogance probably had kicked in because I had not heard of PTSD. I was not bothered about my injuries, and I was not even bothered about the fact that I was like a born soldier. I had gone to a military preparatory school, and my knowledge of anything other than the armed forces was almost negligible. So from being one of the best, I was moving into a world where I had zero life skills. Or so I thought that night. One life skill which always stayed with me was that I was trained never to give up. Remember, this was end of 1999, where the whole world was talking about Y2K millennium bug. And there was one institute 2 kilometers from our hospital which was offering to start from the basics and make you an IT pro in a span of 2 years. I promptly enrolled in the program. Enrolling was easy by sending the form. The problem of how to get to the institute needed to be solved. One officer came forward, volunteered to take me in his car, but I still had some more help which I needed. I needed to be lifted from the hospital bed to the car and from car to the classroom. But I had it all sorted out in my mind. And there were solutions galore. There were some able-bodied patients who came forward, and I started attending these bi-weekly classes. The stunts of mine, they increased the pain, but the mental decision trumped all that. I realized that the pain of disappointment was much larger than the pain of discipline which I was undergoing, and hence, just soldiered on arrogantly. The second trait which I see myself in is about the arrogant optimism. I couldn't have chosen the outcome of the firefight. I couldn't have chosen the degree of incapacitation due to my wounds. The only thing I could have chosen was how I react to what came my way. I remember one incident very clearly. In one of those IT classes, the teacher asked a problem and nobody answered. She threatened that she would call someone out of the class in the front and ask us to solve the problem. I sheepishly looked at the guy next to me. I said, "I don't know the answer." He casually responded, "She'll never call you." What he actually meant was, she will never call you because you can't even stand. That hit me. But it actually hit me in a very positive way. I realized it was not me who was bothered, worried, or even aware of my own physical limitation. I had one. It was 3 months after the injury, and the mind had still not registered that something in life had changed and changed permanently. That day I realized I'm supposed to stay this way, arrogantly optimistic. Now, I'll move to how I retain this arrogance. The first factor in retaining the arrogance is to be humble, learn and adapt, and learn and continue to do that from every individual, every incident. I'll take a break from the lift and study business and confess that earlier I said that I didn't read the same books as the doctors. I actually did, and a lot more. After my first injury, I could summarize the issues like a doctor or like a psychologist because patient psychology played an important part. I remember once I was admitted, or rather forced admitted in a hospital to help out another officer who had undergone similar kind of stoma surgery as mine. I also learned from experiences of others. I was once visited by a senior officer after going through the course for about 2 months. He was working in the technology industry then. He suggested that given my background, I do not start anything fresh and try and do an MBA for having a soft landing in the corporate. Logical? So now I had to figure out this MBA stuff. I turned to other knowledgeable patients in the hospital and found that the best university there ran an MBA program. So I called my friend with the car for help. Destination, B School's dean's office. By then, I had, with some effort, started standing on 2 crutches. So I hobbled into the dean's office, introduced myself, asked him a direct question: would you take me into your MBA class? The dean just looked at me with a sense of disbelief. And that disbelief was not because of my physical condition, but because of my arrogance of ignorance. He just responded saying, I would love you to be in the class, but you will have to go through an entrance test, which is due in a month, and the last date of application is already over. He was trying to be polite, but it was start of learnings for me. I learned that if I needed to succeed in this world, I needed to know it the way I knew the armed forces. So I was back in the hospital with a new plan. I read up anything and everything about MBA and how to get there. The last relationship I had with mathematics was 13 years back in grade 12. So I bought books from grade 5 to grade 12, read up everything cover to cover, and I read up Tony Buzan, Peter Combe, Wade Cutler, anything to improve my speed comprehension. I had all the time in the world. I was still undergoing a lot of surgeries. So I used that opportunity. That was my opportunity to learn. The next factor which helps me retain my arrogance is of external grace. Internal resolve, it helps me recuperate faster, and it helps me bounce back much, much faster. I actually had many days when I couldn't, I had unbearable pain, but I never let it impact any of my job at hand. And I never brought it up to anyone. I largely remained self-reliant. I moved from being in the hospital for 1 year, getting the body parts reconstructed, replaced, to being declared 80% medically disabled, to 2 crutches, to 1 crutch, to being normal. But I kept looking for the next milestone with acceptance of both successes and failures with the same grace. The third factor, which I think is the most important one, is of the support, the support network which I got. I was extremely lucky in this case, getting support from all quarters possible. I had slightly different approach here, where I would heavily engage with my close support network, but simultaneously, I aggressively disengage with anything or anyone with the slightest of the negative tinge. I find this process to be highly invigorating. I think that this helps me retain my arrogance, because there's no one who tells me that I cannot do something. Today, I want to thank someone in the audience here. When I was injured the second time, I was already engaged. When the doctors told me that I would never walk again, I gave option to my fiancée, or the then fiancée, to break the engagement. She refused. She just said, what if this had happened after marriage? Today, I value life much more because of these experiences. I'll finish with a few lines from Invictus, and I'll just keep it to the last two. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Thank you.